When a liberal reporter tried to corner Clint Eastwood with a loaded question, they had no idea what they were in for. Eastwood, known for his no-nonsense demeanor both on and off screen, didn't just answer. He fired back with a response so sharp it left the reporter speechless. The exchange took place during an interview meant to discuss his latest film, but as often happens with Hollywood legends, the conversation drifted into politics. The reporter, clearly expecting Eastwood to soften his stance or offer a politically correct answer, instead found themselves on the receiving end of a masterclass in blunt honesty. Eastwood, a man who has built his career on playing characters, who stand up for what they believe in, didn't mince words. When the reporter questioned him about his past political comments, trying to paint him as out of touch with modern Hollywood, Eastwood leaned in and delivered a response that made it clear he wasn't backing down. He reminded the reporter that he had been in Hollywood long enough to see trends come and go, including the way political narratives shift. I've been around long enough to know that opinions change with the wind, but principles, those don't change, he said, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension in the room. The reporter, caught off guard, tried to reframe the question, suggesting that Eastwood's views might be controversial in today's Hollywood. But Eastwood wasn't having it. With a slight smirk, he replied, "Controversial to who? People who think everyone should think exactly like them? I've never been interested in playing that game." It wasn't the first time Eastwood had spoken. His mind, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. His career has been defined by a refusal to conform, whether in the roles he chooses or the way he speaks about the world. From Dirty Harry to Gran Torino, his characters often mirror his real-life attitude, unapologetic, direct, and unwilling to be bullied into silence. The reporter, realizing they were up against a man who wouldn't be rattled, attempted a different approach, asking if Eastwood felt any pressure to align with Hollywood's dominant political views. His response was classic Clint. "If I worried about pressure, I wouldn't have made half the movies I've made. Hollywood didn't build my career, audiences did." That one statement summed up why Eastwood remains one of the most respected figures in the industry. Unlike many actors who mold their public image to fit current trends, Eastwood has always spoken from the heart, regardless of whether it aligns with the mainstream narrative. As the interview continued, the atmosphere grew more intense. The reporter brought up past criticisms of Eastwood's films, suggesting that some of his stories reflected outdated ideas. But once again, Eastwood didn't flinch. "I tell stories that interest me. If people don't like them, they don't have to watch. That's the beauty of choice," he said. The remark was met with silence. It was clear that the reporter had expected Eastwood to backpedal, to offer some kind of apology or reconsideration. Instead, they got the same unfiltered honesty that has defined his entire career. What makes moments like this so powerful is that Eastwood isn't just speaking for himself. He's speaking for countless people who feel like they can't voice their opinions without being attacked. In an era where many celebrities walk on eggshells, Eastwood reminds us that there's value in standing your ground. By the time the interview wrapped up, it was evident that the reporter had run out of angles. They had tried to paint Eastwood into a corner, but instead, they had given him the perfect opportunity to show why he remains an icon. As the cameras stopped rolling, sources say Eastwood simply leaned back in his chair, gave one of his trademark smirks, and said, "That was fun." It was a moment that perfectly encapsulated who he is, cool, collected, and utterly unshaken by the noise of the modern world. Clint Eastwood has never been one to follow the crowd, and that's exactly why his fans respect him. Whether directing, acting, or speaking his mind, he does so with the confidence of someone who has nothing to prove and no interest in playing by anyone else's rules. So, the next time someone tries to corner Clint Eastwood with a loaded question, they'd better be ready, because he's got decades of experience in delivering lines that leave people speechless. And that's exactly why Clint Eastwood stands apart from so many others in Hollywood. He doesn't seek approval from the media or the industry. He never has. His career is built on the trust of audiences who appreciate his authenticity, his grit, and his refusal to compromise his principles just to fit in. What happened in that interview was just another example of what people have always admired about him. While so many celebrities bend to the pressures of public opinion, constantly apologizing and walking back their statements to avoid controversy, Eastwood remains a rock, unmoved, unshaken, and completely uninterested in playing by someone else's. This wasn't the first time a journalist had tried to push him into a corner, and it definitely won't be the last. But if there's one thing we know about Clint Eastwood, it's that he doesn't get rattled. He doesn't stumble over his words or try to find a middle ground just to please a certain group of people. Instead, he responds with the same confidence and sharp wit that made him a legend in the first place. And here's the thing. That's exactly why fans love him. They know that when Eastwood speaks, he's not reading from a Hollywood-approved script. He's not afraid to say what he believes, even if it ruffles some feathers. In an era where so many celebrities are terrified of saying the wrong thing, Eastwood stands tall, showing that real strength comes from standing your ground, no matter who tries to push you off it. After that interview, the reactions were split, as you'd expect. His supporters praised him for sticking to his guns, for refusing to be intimidated. Social media lit up with comments from fans applauding him for staying true to himself. Clint Eastwood is the last of a dying breed, one user wrote. A real man who speaks his mind and doesn't care about the backlash. But of course, there were also those who criticized him. Certain media outlets accused him of being outdated, of refusing to adapt to modern Hollywood. They tried to paint him as stubborn, as someone unwilling to evolve with the times. But the truth is, Eastwood isn't stuck in the past. He just refuses to let go of something that's becoming increasingly rare in Hollywood. Honesty. Think about it. How many actors, directors, or public figures today are willing to speak their minds without carefully crafting their words to fit the latest narrative? How many of them can say they truly stand by their beliefs, no matter how much pressure they face to conform? Not many. And that's why Eastwood remains a living legend. His legacy isn't just about the films he's made, though those alone would be enough to cement his place in history. It's about the way he's carried himself throughout his career. Never apologizing for who he is, never chasing popularity, and never compromising his values just to gain favor with the media. Hollywood has changed dramatically over the years. The industry today is more focused on political correctness than ever before. But Eastwood, he refuses to play that game. He still believes in telling compelling stories, in creating films that challenge audiences, that make them think, that aren't afraid to be raw and real. And at the end of the day, that's what separates legends from the rest. While others worry about what's trending, Eastwood focuses on what matters: truth, authenticity, and respect for the audience. So, what does all of this mean for the future? If there's one thing we can be sure of, it's that Clint Eastwood isn't changing anytime soon. He will keep making films his way. He will keep speaking his mind. And if a reporter or anyone else tries to challenge him, they better be ready for a response they won't soon forget. Because when Clint Eastwood fires back, he doesn't just shut down a question, he leaves a lasting impression. And in a world where so many are afraid to stand their ground, that's something truly rare. And that's why Clint Eastwood remains a force to be reckoned with, both in Hollywood and beyond. While many actors and directors seem to tiptoe around controversy, carefully measuring their words to avoid backlash, Eastwood doesn't play that game. He speaks his mind with the same confidence and clarity that made him famous in the first place. After that interview, the fallout was predictable. Mainstream media outlets scrambled to spin the moment into something negative, trying to frame Eastwood as out of touch or problematic. But their attempts fell flat. Why? Because the people who admire Clint Eastwood, the ones who have followed his career for decades, know exactly who he is. They don't need the media to tell them what to think. They respect him because he has never changed to fit someone else's agenda. And that's exactly why Eastwood has outlasted so many of his critics. He doesn't play by Hollywood's rules. He doesn't cater to political narratives. He doesn't seek validation from journalists or social media mobs. Instead, he focuses on what he does best, making great films and telling great stories. It's worth noting that this isn't the first time Eastwood has had to deal with critics trying to paint him in a negative light. Throughout his career, he has faced accusations of being too old-fashioned, too blunt, or too unwilling to conform. But rather than letting those criticisms affect him, he has always responded the same way, by doing exactly what he believes is right, no matter the consequences. Take, for example, his 2012 speech at the Republican National Convention. That moment, where he spoke to an empty chair as a stand-in for then-President Obama, was widely mocked by the media. They called it strange, awkward, and out of place. But Eastwood? He didn't care. He said what he wanted to say, in the way he wanted to say it, and moved on. The same could be said for his films. Over the years, Eastwood has tackled topics that many directors would shy away from. Whether it's the hard-hitting realism of Gran Torino, the patriotic grit of American Sniper, or the complex moral dilemmas in $1 Million Baby, Eastwood has never been afraid to tell stories that challenge audiences. And while some critics have taken issue with his willingness to explore certain themes, audiences have responded in overwhelming numbers, making his films box office successes time and time again. So, when that reporter tried to push Eastwood into a corner, they weren't just facing a Hollywood legend, they were facing someone who has spent a lifetime standing up for what he believes in. They weren't going to intimidate him. They weren't going to silence him. If anything, they only gave him another opportunity to show why he remains one of the most respected figures in the industry. What's even more remarkable is that Eastwood isn't just admired for his film work, he's admired for his character. He's the kind of person who doesn't just talk about toughness and integrity, he lives it. At 94 years old, he's still directing, still acting, still proving that age is just a number. He doesn't let Hollywood politics or media scrutiny dictate his choices. He stays true to himself, and that's something incredibly rare in today's world. And that's why this moment will stick with people. It wasn't just about a sharp response to a reporter. It was about everything Clint Eastwood represents: strength, independence, and the courage to speak the truth, even when it's unpopular. So, what's next for Clint Eastwood? If history tells us anything, it's that he'll keep doing what he's always done, making the movies he wants to make, saying what he wants to say, and refusing to bow to the pressures of modern Hollywood. And as long as there are people who appreciate honesty, grit, and a refusal to conform, Clint Eastwood will continue to be a legend. Because in a world where so many are afraid to take a stand, he remains a symbol of what it means to be truly fearless. And that's why, when Clint Eastwood fires back, the whole world listens.